What is the IT strategy for the U.S. Department of Energy? How is it modernizing its IT systems and infrastructure? And what are the challenges and opportunities that advanced wireless present for the Department of Energy? I'll explore these questions and so much more with a very special guest, Ann Dunkin, Chief Information Officer at the U.S. Department of Energy. I'm wondering, how is your office organized? What is the mission of the office, and how are you organized to support the overall mission of energy?
So, Michael, our office is organized. Our mission is to provide IT service delivery, cybersecurity, technology innovation, digital transformation, and enable collaboration across DOE. And that includes cyber workforce development. It also includes managing spectrum for all of DOE. So we have sort of a broad array of things that we do. And part of what we do is service connectors and conveners across DOE and sometimes across the enterprise or even across the including the private sector and sometimes even our international partners. So an example is we released DOE's Advanced Wireless Strategy, which I hope we'll get a chance to talk about in a little more detail. It's the first strategy DOE's had, and we started by cataloging what DOE does, and then so we would all know and could share that, and then moving on to identifying gaps and developing a strategy and identifying gaps across the enterprise that we can then fill. So that's an example of how we provide that that convening and stewardship role across DOE. Some of the other things we do in our office is, as I mentioned, we have a modernization role. So we ensure that modernization happens in DOE across the enterprise in an appropriate manner. So, for example, we're working in our office to develop a low-code platform that can be shared across DOE with a rapid ATO process. So this is nothing new. We've been talking about doing this since the last time I was in the federal government. But it's just this important thing to have the ability to very quickly deploy applications across the enterprise. And so that's a big part of what we're doing in our office is developing the capability, number one, for us to deliver new services and capabilities fast, and number two, to provide a platform that other people across DOE can use to deliver services quickly. And obviously, we do things as well as that you might expect, like enterprise IT, commodity IT, all those things that are going to keep trains running on time, because we got to keep the trains running on time so that we can do the other fun things like our innovation projects and things like that. So obviously, I mentioned we're responsible for cybersecurity. We operate the Joint Cybersecurity Coordination Center across DOE, and that is where we consolidate cyber information across the enterprise, identify trends, collect metrics, send out tippers to the organization and indicators of compromise, and ensure that we are working in a coordinated manner to defend DOE. And I've been talking a lot recently about collective defense. There's a lot of ways collective defense shows up, and one of the ways collective defense shows up is us defending ourselves across the DOE enterprise ourselves. And then I'll just mention a couple other things. Obviously, we provide oversight for FTAR and FSMA. We also manage CUI and records and privacy across DOE. And we provide oversight across DOE's entire investment portfolio. As we roll up our budget for FY23, we're looking at somewhere around $3.6 billion in IT spend, plus another $600 million in supercomputing. So DOE's budget is looking to be around $4.2 billion that we provide oversight for FY23. And then finally, I'll wrap up by saying we also are responsible for data and geospatial information across DOE. So that's a whole lot I just told you about that we do. And we have a small organization, relatively speaking, that provide leadership and oversight across that entire portfolio.
I'm wondering, Ann, when you give us that kind of tee up, what kind of responsibilities and duties do you have per se as the CIO at Energy? What's a day in the life of the CIO?
Well, like one of the things I love about being a federal CIO is the day in the life one day is going to be totally different from the day in the life the next day. So I have the privilege of reporting to Secretary Granholm and Deputy Secretary Turk, and really have their support to drive change across the enterprise. to make us more efficient and more secure and more innovative across DOE, and to support DOE's mission to modernize energy infrastructure across the country and to ensure a clean energy future, to ensure Justice 40, the president's initiative to ensure that 40% of the benefits of our investments go to underserved and overburdened communities, and to really make the future of our country bright and positive in the energy sector. I'm particularly excited as an EV owner that we get to support rolling out EV chargers across the country right now as part of our bill funding. So when you look at that, so what does that mean? What do we do to support that? What do I do to support that? So on a day-to-day basis, obviously, there's a significant role around IT planning and budgeting, not in the development phase of those things, but in the ensuring that we set the right priorities, that we're applying our money in the right places. And then it's my job to advocate across DOE, across with our congressional colleagues at OMB, to ensure that people understand why we need that funding and how we're going to spend that funding, and that they're going to provide the money we need to do our jobs. I also provide oversight across DOE, which means within the department, I lead our governance efforts. The Cyber Council, which is chaired by Deputy Secretary Turk and co-chaired by myself, meet on a regular basis to lead that governance effort that I work on with my team. So again, on an ongoing basis, I'm going to be having conversations where we're looking at what are people trying to do within DOE to advance IT innovation, cybersecurity, other parts of our mission. And I'm going to be working with my team and with parts of DOE, because DOE is a very federated organization, to identify the right projects to be working on. And obviously, I'm not personally identifying those projects, but working with those folks to understand the projects they're proposing and what we're going to be spending on those and how we're going to accomplish those to ensure that they're effective projects. So we have conversations about governance, about what we're accomplishing, about those projects, and about the metrics coming up through the organization to see how we're doing on our performance around, FSMA and FITARA metrics and other metrics we might develop internally across DOE. Obviously, we have to deliver high quality IT services. So on a daily basis, I'm not engaged day to day in the oversight of that, but what I am doing is making sure that we have the tools and capabilities, the people, the right things in the right places so we can deliver high quality IT services to the organization. And beyond that, I'm constantly out talking to people, whether it's people in DOE, whether it's people in the interagency or our international partners. We're constantly having conversations about what we're trying to do, how we can partner together and achieve results. And the last thing I'll mention is just in that, as an example, I'm one of the chairs of the innovation committee as the CIO council. And so that's an opportunity for me to drive DOE's mission forward, but also drive forward work across the interagency. So that's another thing that I spend my time on. So those are sort of the big buckets of things, but every day is different, and that's the exciting part.
And would you tell us more about your IT strategy and maybe highlight some of your priorities?
So, DOE's IT strategy is, well, interestingly, that's an interesting question, in part because we're sort of in process of redeveloping our IT strategy across DOE. And the reason for that is that I actually did not want to come into DOE and say, yep, here's our strategy. This is my plan. And in fact, I showed up and people kept saying to me, what is your strategy? What is it that you want us to do? And I'm like, well, first of all, it's not my strategy. It's DOE's IT strategy. I don't own it. We own it together. And number two, I don't know, because I just got here, and why would I know? And what part of that is, DOE has, people keep saying DOE said 6 CIOs in 7 years when I got there. And it's not entirely true because, half of those were acting CIOs. But the fact of the matter is that my predecessors all came in and had a vision, and there was a bit of organizational whiplash as people went from one vision to another vision. And so I wanted to make sure that we didn't have that kind of organizational whiplash, that we took our time to build a strategy that is owned by my organization as a whole and informed by the needs of the broader DOE enterprise. So with that said, I will attempt to actually answer your question that you asked. First of all, my new deputy, Brian Epley, has taken leadership of that strategy process, and we do intend to have a strategy published by the end of the year. We're going to be meeting with all the component CIOs early, or actually late in January, and our goal is to have that in place to test with them and to move forward. Obviously, one pillar of our strategy is around keeping the plane flying. As I said, and as everyone tells you, right, Michael, it's table stakes. You've got to show up with IT services that work. Secondly, cybersecurity is a big piece of the strategy. We have to ensure that the department remains secure, that we continue to enhance the security. And there are a bunch of projects and programs, which I'm not going to tell you about because everybody's already told you about them and you know about them, that are driven by executive order, by CISA, by Congress saying, thou shalt have zero trust, thou shalt have PIV, and all these things. They're all important. There's no doubt about them. But the thing that's important in our approach to that is we're approaching that from a risk-based standpoint. So we're saying, look, we can't do all this. And some of it we can't do because it's technically not feasible right now on some of our OT systems. Some of it we're not going to do because we don't have enough money. So we're going to identify our greatest risks, and those risks are the thing that is have the greatest impact and most likely to happen. And so it's if you can quantify it, it's kind of a math problem, but we can't really quantify it. But you take those two factors and you say these are our highest risks, and we focus in on those highest risks, and we work on compliance as best we can in that framework. So that's the second item. The third item is I talked about is innovation. It's getting good and better at delivering new capabilities across the enterprise. We've got a lot of needs across DOE for new solutions, and so how do we have the framework and infrastructure in terms of low-code platform and rapid ATO to allow people to build tools and capabilities, and then we can either build them for people or provide them the tools and technologies to build things themselves. So that's hugely important that we be able to deliver that. And then, we have our one of our big areas of focus around the rest of the mission is spectrum. We have with 5G and other broadband technologies, we really have to focus in on our role as spectrum managers across DOE. And that as an example of how we work across the enterprise. 5G is one piece. We are working across the enterprise to understand cyber defense across the enterprise. We're working across the enterprise to look at our supply chain risk management programs, catalog those across the enterprise, and figure out how to make sure that we are not duplicating efforts in that space. So that big role in our strategy is to be that coordinator, convener, collaborator with our partners to say, DOE is big, we know a whole lot of stuff, let's go find out what those things are and share it across the enterprise and not take anybody's job, not take credit for anybody's work, but ensure that everybody in DOE, and in some cases outside of DOE, knows what we're doing, and we can coordinate and be more efficient and effective because of it. So I would say that is probably not how the strategy is going to roll out and exactly what it's going to look like when we get there, but those are key initiatives that we are taking in that strategy space.
So, Anne, picking up on that, how are you working to scale smaller, innovative successes across Energy's highly federated department? And how does the Scaling IT Modernization Playbook factor into these efforts? And perhaps you could tell us more about the playbook, highlight some of the key aspects of it.
Yeah, I want to start by first saying that the playbook credit, because I don't want to forget to say this, credit for the playbook goes to a lot of people. All I get is credit for the idea. We had a tremendous team that built the playbook for us, and they interviewed smart people from across the federal government and the private sector. I think the great thing about the playbook is that if you'd asked me to write down my list of plays before we started, what we ended up with was not the same list that I would have started with, which just proves that none of us is as smart as all of us, and that together we have really great ideas and great knowledge that we need to tap. So that said, the idea of the playbook goes back to the time that early in the pandemic when I was working for Dell, and apparently I couldn't sort of just stay home and relax. And so I signed up for a day one project, and I got my CTO from EPA, Greg Godbout, to do that with me, and we put together this proposal for several things, and one of which was the federal government should build a scaling IT modernization playbook, because what we've seen is we've got a lot of places where we're doing modern development, where we're doing Agile, where we're doing DevSecOps, and they're little pockets. And how do we make those little pockets into a big landscape of scaled innovation? And there are very few places where that exists. The Air Force has done some great work with their software factories. Other people are starting to follow that. There's not a lot of it. So we said, how do we do that? One of the things was the playbook. Came back to government, and I was able to build that playbook. And so the idea behind that playbook is to give people all the the tools and capabilities that if they run these plays, they're going to help them move forward to being able to scale modern development practices across their enterprise, instead of keeping in these small pockets of innovation across their organization. So that was the purpose, and it's been hugely successful in terms of people looking at it. I mentioned earlier I was at a FedScoop event. I think I had 3 different people come up to me and say they'd seen the playbook, they liked the playbook, they wanted to talk about the playbook, and that was just in one evening. So it's out there. It's actually at energy.gov/CIO. It's available to anybody to take it, use it, share it. We're not proprietary about it. Private sector, public sector, anyone can use it, and we hope that it is helpful to people in their modernization journey.
And I want to jump ahead to the department's recent release of the advanced wireless strategy. Could you tell us more about this strategy, and what are some of the challenges and opportunities that advanced wireless, that is 5G and beyond, present to DOE, and how is the strategy developed?
Sure, Michael. The advanced wireless strategy was developed as a collaboration across DOE. So it started as an inventory, which was actually a request from the White House, inventory our 5G capabilities across DOE. So we developed the 5G capabilities and delivered that and shared it with DOE and the interagency, even some of our international partners. And the goal there being, make sure DOE knows what DOE knows. So not only can we not do the same project twice, so that people can collaborate when one lab sees something else that another lab is doing, but also so that that our labs do work for a lot of people. They do work. There's a strategic partnership program where they do work for others. Sharing out what this does brings the opportunity for additional revenue into DOE to the labs for their projects. And the DOE labs doing work for others, that lowers DOE's cost and sometimes the government's cost when that work is done by others outside the USG or for others outside the USG. So once we did that, and it was a very enthusiastic group of people from across the enterprise, it became apparent that really the next step was a strategy. So we used that opportunity to have the same group of smart people help us build out a strategy for 5G and advanced wireless across DOE to help us understand how we can continue to contribute to that space to help further the U.S. efforts to be global leaders in telecommunication and enhance the resilience of our national critical infrastructure. Because DOE doesn't do work in advanced wireless for the heck of it. We work in that space because it's critically important to government and it's critically important to DOE's operations. So we did that, and then we're able to identify the gaps in our strategy and say, what do we need to fill? And then my organization is identifying projects and capabilities that will fill those gaps in our 5G strategy across DOE. But I'll just share with you the priorities of advanced wireless coming out of that strategy. So number one is we want to advance the development of capabilities to further secure our access to spectrum that's sufficient for DOE. Spectrum is a hot commodity, and the private sector continues to push into the government spectrum, and government continues to compete amongst ourselves for spectrum, and we need access to dedicated spectrum in many cases to ensure things like grid timing and support of our nuclear mission and things like that. We also want to understand and mitigate threats and vulnerabilities through enhanced monitoring techniques and robust implementation of security measures and supply chain risk management. So that's the second pillar. The third is advancing the energy mission through grid modernization and help us secure our path to net zero. And that is net zero energy, net zero carbon energy, to be clear what that net zero means. We want to be able to support communications equity by using our assets to develop and deploy broadband capability to rural and underserved communities. Because if you look at where DOE's plants and sites are, they are perfectly situated to help be anchor points for broadband across the nation. And so we want to work with Commerce and others to ensure that our plants and sites and PMAs can contribute to that solution of helping underserved communities in getting broadband access. And then finally, our goal is to increase collaboration and coordination with our internal and external partners and our stakeholders to leverage capabilities, share discoveries, and best practices. So those are the outcomes of our strategy and what we want to accomplish going forward. And we're really excited to be that convener across DOE as part of my role as DOE's senior Spectrum official.
This has been the Business of Government Hour, a conversation with Ann Dunkin, Chief Information Officer at the U.S. Department of Energy. Be sure to join us next time for another informative, insightful, and in-depth conversation on improving government technology and its effectiveness. Subscribe, download, and listen to the entire interview at Podcast One, iTunes, or on your favorite podcast app, and as always at businessofgovernment.org.